Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I apologize for the delay. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but here we are.
Can I just check with Mr. Wilson? Are we all set, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's all right. So item 1.02, would someone move it, please? Move it.
Second.
Are there any additions or corrections to the
Yes,
agenda?
there are, Ms. Griffin. 7.02, there was a name added. There was a change of role for that person. So you'll see that person's name later in the agenda. 7.03, we had the pleasure of finding a school psychologist. So we'd like to appoint that school psychologist this evening. And then we moved the Jewel case with respect to the e-cigarettes and vaping to after executive session so we can have discussion with respect to that case.
All right. If there's no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed and abstention. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what, folks, I've got to do this a little bit different. I'm still in the other mode. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Perry to do a roll call for all of our items here on out. And I apologize for not getting that right out of the gate.
No problem. Okay, Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
and Mrs. Griffin.
I'm a yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Perry. And just as a reminder for public forum, now that our district is holding our meetings virtually again, there is a live stream video of all of our Board of Education meetings that's available for public viewing at www.fultoncsd.org. You can watch in real time, or you can go to our website and watch the meeting at your convenience. Community members, anyone that wishes to provide input or has questions may do so through the district email, which is clerk@fultoncsd.org. You may also find that address on our district website. And just for public knowledge, when you send an item to clerk, all board members see it. I'd like to move us on now to item 1.04, please.
Move it.
Second.
Move it.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Item 1.05, please.
Move it.
Move it. Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
All right. President's report. Are there any questions on any of the items other than our discussion we're going to have here in a minute with regard to David as our voting delegate?
Yeah, just double checking. I thought I saw an email from Donna Blake that the reception was canceled on the 14th. Is that not the case?
David, I would have to go and check. I haven't looked at my email in a little bit, so I'm not certain.
I'm thinking it was due maybe to a lack of response, and it was way back when things were kind of really looking problematic with the virus a couple weeks ago, but I could be wrong. So can we just can Jean just send us an email once we find out?
Yes.
Will do.
All right. So no questions on anything except now with the NYSBA resolutions. And Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. So it looked like things were pretty good, as they usually are, until we get to the section of the resolutions that are not recommended by the resolutions committee. And then I think, depending how you look at that when you vote yes? Are you voting with the recommendation? Do you, I wonder in my head, with the split that I saw on many of those resolutions. So I just need to clarify if they truly are individual board members supporting the resolution or supporting the resolutions committee's recommendation not to support. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they confuse me too.
Yeah, it's always confusing to everybody, and I think we only do this once a year, so that's why it's confusing. But the ones that really stood out to me, depending on how they were viewed, that were just really close were Resolution 19 and Resolution 23. And then, again, they were in the second half of the
Right.
the group. They were in the group that was not recommended by the committee.
Do you have offhand what they were?
So are you asking us, Dave, if we're
I'm just wondering if you can recall how you may have filled out the voting for your own individual response. Were you with the committee, or did you find yourself in disagreement with the committee in that section? Was there
So-
any? Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So for me, David, my vote would express whether or not I supported voting yes or no on the resolution. So if I was a yes, it would be yes, which would be anti what the recommendation was.
I think we lost Dave. I think he got kicked out.
Uh-oh.
I saw that he left the meeting, so I think something might have happened.
And while we're waiting for David, Resolution 19 was to seek legislative and/or policy changes to streamline the teacher certification process for teachers from out of state and those with previous teaching experience. And that was not recommended to move forward by the committee, the NYSBA committee. They did not recommend it.
And I think because of the fact that they already had strict rules, if I read correctly, they explained why.
Yes. Yes.
So what David's asking is if they did not recommend it, then if I voted yes, that would mean I agree with them not recommending it. So,
Well, that's what he's asking. If
that
I
what he's
voted
asking?
yes, I would be saying, so I support this resolution. I support the school district that offered it. That's how I voted. I voted whether or not I supported the resolution that was offered by the district. I did not vote yes or no in support of the recommendation. I voted on the school district's resolution.
Is that how everyone else?
And I
recalled
voted
it?
on school district. That's how I voted, was on the school board resolution.
Okay.
Me too. I don't know about
Were
the.
we supposed to be voting?
That's not how I
Were we
voted.
supposed to be voting the other way?
No, I think you did it the right way, but it always gets confusing, that section.
So David, I just shared with them that
Okay.
Resolution 19,
Yep.
what that is. So I was just asking, you said that was one that you had some concerns with.
Yep.
And
I
then
just wanted to
you
be
went
clear.
on teacher certification
Yep.
process.
So we're voting in favor. The majority are with 19 in support of that resolution, according to what I saw. And then the other one was number 23.
And
That one wasn't as close.
number 23 was to support legislation that creates a process for tenure review and renewal occurring every 5 years throughout the career of all tenured public school employees. And the process would include student, parent, and colleague feedback and will not be driven by test scores and is intended to be instructive, not punitive.
And I think they also put down there that that's been turned down before.
Yes.
Mhm. Yes.
I'll remember that one. Yep.
So I
Right,
don't know how
As
you
long
feel.
as long as you approach that resolution the same way as you articulated you did with 19, I'm clear on how, on how I should represent. I just wanted to be clear that there was no confusion, because I know that it does get confusing, especially for folks that are new to the process.
And I know we've never had it that close before. Generally, we go with their
Yep.
recommendation. So this was weird for me too when I was reading it.
Okay.
All right, I'm good.
Any other items? Anything anybody wants to ask?
I just,
David at this time?
David, I'm going to double check on that and get back to you. I just want
Okay.
to make sure. I have to
Okay.
reread that.
All right. Just let me know. Shoot me an email.
All right. And thank you again, David, for taking on that responsibility. It's appreciated.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. I don't have anything else, so I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Polvino. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Mrs. Griffin. Hello, everybody. Good evening, and I hope everyone has been enjoying the unbelievably warm weather here in central New York. And I know I actually had a meeting to talk about snow removal this morning. So for me, I'm already in a different gear. But it is pleasant out there today, as well as this past weekend. I want to start off with a celebration. October is Principal Month, and our principals and all of our administrators go above and beyond. But the recognition for our principals this month is special. They are second to none. This team
Hey, princess.
is doing an outstanding job, and I am impressed with the quality of supports that they have in place and the leadership that they provide our staff, our students, and to our communities. They truly are doing a stellar job, and they work so closely with the entire administrative team, but they're on the front lines with our teachers and our kids. And so this evening, I'd like Reagan, you're going to read the proclamation. We're going to ask our student representative to read the principal's proclamation for National Principals Month. Reagan.
Okay. So through visionary leadership and tireless pursuit of success for each student, school principals guide and support their schools in ways large and small every day. As we face new challenges presented in COVID-19, our principals continue to come through, especially when it mattered most. School principals play a multitude of roles as educational visionaries, instructional leaders, community builders, spokespersons, budget analysts, facility managers, special program administrators, advocates, and implementation experts, and use such skills for the betterment of the students in their charge. School principals establish safe school environments that facilitate learning for every student and foster both a sense of belonging and personal responsibility. They provide high-quality learning opportunities for students, leadership for their school and communities, and exemplary contributions to their profession. The vision, actions, and dedication of principals provide a mobilizing force behind school success and continuous improvement. The celebration of Principals Month honors elementary school, middle school, and high school principals and recognizes the important role principals play in ensuring that every child has access to high-quality education and the support needed for success. Hence, the school board, the Board of Education, of the Fulton City School District, along with Mr. Brian Polvino, Superintendent of the Fulton City School District, do hereby proclaim October 2021 as Principals Month and commend its observance to all district employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Reagan. You know, I think it's the first time we've ever had a student read the proclamation. And for me, that really is the right thing to do, because ultimately the reason why we're all here and who we serve is our children, and all of our children every day. And our principals and the entire administrative team really do an outstanding job with that, along with all of the staff and the faculty and the families and students that they serve. So thank you to our principals, and thank you to Reagan for reading that proclamation this evening. Are there any questions this evening from any of the board members? So congratulations to our principals. Thank you for all your efforts on behalf of our kids. Our next item this evening is our Fulton City School District extended school year. That's our special education 12-month programming. We have Mrs. Adams, who is our director of special education, and as well as Julie Cook Lynch, who coordinated this summer. So Mrs. Adams, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'll get started. Julie's going to put the PowerPoint up. Good evening. I want to thank the board for allowing us to present yearly on our special ed summer education program. I'd like to introduce, again, you just introduced Julie Cook Lynch. She actually filled the position as a supervisor for the program as an administrative intern. I want you to know she did a wonderful job and was a strong administrative support to our program, and she made sure that my summer went very well. Right, Julie? Yes. So Julie, you're muted. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who's going to present.
Apologize about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And you can see?
Yes, we can.
Sorry
Everybody
about
can see.
that.
Yep. Thumbs up.
Fantastic.
Everybody's thumbs up.
Thank you for your patience. So good evening. I would like to begin by thanking Kathy Adams, Mr. Palvino, the Board of Education and District Administration for the internship opportunity to supervise the ESY program for students with special needs. It was a phenomenal experience working side by side with talented educators in our district and building relationships with students in our five classes or programs. I would like to take a few minutes this evening to provide you with a snapshot of what ESY entailed, as well as highlights and celebrations. Here we go. These are the dates that summer school operated for 30 days. Our enrollment stayed steady compared to the past few summers, with 45 students participating in our ESY program. As in the past, the district used GRB and 2 elementary schools to house our five classes. Of the 5 classes, there were 3 12-1-4 classes, which support our most medically fragile and significantly involved students with developmental disabilities. The other 2 summer classes were our 611 programs, which support behavior management needs of students. Staffing included numerous professionals to support the intricate needs of our students that included 5 special education teachers, an adaptive physical education teacher, OT, PT, speech, 1 full-time nurse that was covered by 2 part-time nurses, to just name a few. We had many professionals supporting the program this summer. ESY has had a strong student attendance rate over the past few years, with dedicated educators that provide services and supports to our students. Students' attendance remained strong once again this summer. 31 students had 90% or better of attendance, and we had a number of students that had perfect attendance. So we had great attendance this summer. At the end of the summer program, staff were given a survey with questions. Educators reported that in-person learning was a very positive experience. Summer school was fun for staff and students. Teams worked well together, and students maintained and increased skills. Some of the highlights from our summer school program included swim lessons, that's always a favorite, walking field trips, and the Fulton Fire Department that visited our 12-1-4 programs at Granby. Parents indicated in the survey that they were given that their child's engagement and interest in school, motivation to learn, behavior, ability to work with others was positively impacted by participating in our ESY 2021 program. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the Board of Education, Mr. Palvino, District Administration, Building Administration, Transportation Department, for the continued support of our ESY program. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Are there any questions from the board?
Did any of the additional funding that we received due to COVID help support the program, or was it funded as it typically is?
We did not use additional funding for summer program, as far as I believe, Mr. Palvino and Mr. Carroll, because we are able to claim our costs based on high cost expenses for that program. Is that correct, Kathy Nichols?
Yes, we stack those students, and there's a rate is set by the rate setting unit at state ed, state aid unit. And based on the number of students and the services, they come up with we send in the costs and they come up with a rate that they'll reimburse us at. Typically, just the general fund pays 20% of the cost, and roughly 80% is covered by the reimbursement.
And is that enrollment driven, Kathy, or is it strictly by the total cost?
It's based on the individual students. So I mean, but then they look at, there's a regional cost index, and they'll come up with it. Typically works out to close to 80%. They won't ever pay more than 80% of the cost. They always expect us to put in a share, our local share.
Thank you.
How is an enrollment figured out? Is it driven by needs or is it an open enrollment?
We determine enrollment based on, there's a regulation that we need to follow in terms of students having regression for skills throughout the year. And teachers are aware of that. We have that documentation has to be submitted on a regular basis to me in my office. Then we meet towards right after Christmas, actually early spring, to start talking with those staff on those students who are demonstrating skills regression based on breaks or after a baseline established in September, and then start working on recommendations for projected student enrollment based on their needs.
Do we have
really individual basis based on teachers and the student needs?
Do we have a cutoff for numbers for enrollment? No?
No.
No, okay.
I think that we're trying to be very careful with following the regulation. There are students in the 1214, and typically because they have significant needs are very much usually applicable to having summer program based on their needs because they don't have regression. They just need to continue building their skills as they go along. Other students, we have to look more closely at the behavior, such as 611 and the 1211 students. But it's a good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mrs. Adams or Ms. Cook-Lynch? As always, Ms. Adams and Ms. Cook-Lynch did an outstanding job with our summer programming. The kids really seem to have a lot of fun and look very engaged this summer. So I appreciate you and all of the work that your staff and all of the ancillary staff and support staff that you shared as well. So thank you to everyone who made this a success.
Thank you, Mr. Palvino. Thank you to the board.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see here. I'm going to share the instructional calendar. We're making an adjustment recommending an adjustment to the instructional calendar, which hopefully will be on your screen in just a moment. And is that clear on your screen? Okay. So each year we take a good look at the calendar. And what we need to do is we've had a conversation with the principals. We're recommending that we add 2 early release days, November 4th and November 12th, for our pre-K through 6th grade students, the purpose being to do the fall, more traditional types of parent-teacher conferences. And so we're recommending that we add those dates to allow us to do that. In 7 through 12, we will do our student-led conferences throughout the course of the year in the more flexible format that we utilized last year. And we can address compensation time and things like that towards the end of the year. But we wanted to build that in for the elementary. The feeling was we needed more traditional parent-teacher conferences, especially after a year and off. The parents will have the option, and Mr. Carroll or Ms. Geithner, please chime in, will have the opportunity to either do them in person or do them through a Google Meet. We actually had many parents who liked that, so we want to leave that as one of the options. Is that correct, Mr. Carroll?
Correct. And that gives parents and teachers flexibility also to be able to schedule them really throughout the month as opposed to just that small window within an afternoon.
Are there any questions? There's a resolution this evening, and then we would get that communication out by tomorrow.
What's the exact dismissal time, Brian?
Our midday, memory
So it's
serves me,
usual half
is
day?
11:15.
Okay.
I just had to get the brain working. I'm sorry. I was
Yeah.
thinking, I was trying to
It's
think the
okay.
old style. 10:30 and 11:15. So 11:15 is the dismissal time for our elementary children on that day, those 2 days. And we will include that in the communication to our families. And we also plan on doing our communication later this week to families and staff as well, on top of tomorrow. Any questions? Okay, thank you. The summer instructional program. Ms. Mainville asked about our programming, and Mr. Cordone had that great question about using our stimulus funds. Well, here's the opportunity for us to talk about a little bit of the use of the stimulus funds. We also, if you remember, in the spring had won another grant, but the combination of the two, we were able to do some unique things, and hopefully we can extend the grant longer. So this is one of those areas. This is a program that we've never offered before. So, Mr. Carroll, if you could talk about our 2021 summer instructional programs, please.
Sure, thank you. Let's go back to summer again, everyone. On the heels of Mrs. Adams and Ms. Cook Lynch's presentation, this presentation really gets into those programs that we have not traditionally been able to offer for the most part. As a little refresher, in the summer of 2021, we were able to offer summer learning opportunities K-12 for all students, general ed and special ed education students, thanks to those additional funding sources that Mr. Palvino mentioned. It was our goal to be able to offer summer camp style. So while there certainly was a focus on learning and also mitigation of learning gaps, we also wanted to make sure that kids had fun and felt welcome in our buildings with each other in advance of returning to in-person instruction Monday through Friday in September. We were able to offer transportation, we were able to offer school meals, we were able to do all of this at no cost to families, again, thanks to the different federal stimulus funding sources that became available to us in May, June, if you remember. This is around when we learned about the funding, about how much we would receive, about what uses were allowable for those funds. At that time, we surveyed our community, and summer programming was one of those items that was a priority. So we were very proud to offer it. Mr. Palvino also mentioned the extended day grant, which was a competitive grant that our district learned that it had won, that its application has won. Those funds have not been released yet. So although the grant period originally included this past summer, the funds haven't been released yet to any of the districts who have been awarded. So we're in a wait and see mode as to whether in the end it will be those federal stimulus funds or the extended learning funds, which end up actually covering the program. Great news is that in summer 2021, we had two available funding options to provide this kind of instruction. So I am really happy to welcome some guests to join me here. We have our program supervisors at each level of what we offered this summer, and they'll really be able to speak to the highlights of life within the programs for the staff and for the kids. We can take a look first at our overall participation and the breakdown of what we were able to offer at each level, including ESY. extended school year, which we heard about already, we engaged 460 Fulton CSD students, K-12, in summer learning, which is great. It gets to be about 15, 16% of our total population who are able to participate. In grades K-4, you can see at the top there in those, what we call the Bridges to Success programs, and that name comes directly from the competitive grant application that I mentioned. You can see that we were able to provide for about 100 of those students full day option in partnership with Oswego County Opportunities, who, as part of our grant, provides childcare in a camp-like setting opposite the morning or afternoon academic session that children attend. So again, those first two, the K2 Bridges to Success and the 3-4 Bridges to Success, we will see again for at least 4 years. We have at least 4 years of funding for that program. We're hoping to learn that because of the delay in the state's release of funds, that grant period will also be extended to include a 5th year. So more on that to come. That's not official yet. Also, our community school program, summer program, we can certainly expect to see again moving forward. This is a continuation of summer program we've been able to offer in the past. And again, those additional funding sources allow us to expand both before 5th grade and after 8th grade to invite all students. So with that, we'll take a look first at our K2 program, which was supervised by Kelly Gates. Ms. Gates, could you give us a wave here? Let's see. I can't see her on my little screen, but I think once she starts talking, we'll hear her. So we have some of the program details, the nuts and bolts here. Again, these were morning or afternoon sessions with the option for that full day childcare as well. The program's focused on doing our best to mitigate learning gaps, which we could expect from the pandemic. So really a focus on essential learning in the areas of literacy and math and social emotional well-being. Okay. And with that, I'll invite Ms. Gates to share some of the highlights.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Oh, there you are. Now I can see you.
I know my computer is being a little bit slow this evening. I just have to say that I had a wonderful experience this summer. I worked a lot with Michelle Briggs. We were pretty great partners this summer in our K4 program. I'm a huge fan of the Littles, so we had lots of fun. Some of the great things the staff shared was that kids entering kindergarten actually got a school experience prior to kindergarten. So that was something they thought was super beneficial for those kids. So kids that were entering kindergarten actually got 4 weeks before they entered kindergarten. The staff also really loved working with other staff from all the different elementary buildings. Students were able to interact with other students from other buildings. It was really a family atmosphere. We had weekly themes that OCO also did with us. So we had wonderful collaboration with OCO. It was really a nice, great summer.
It was. I appreciate that, Kelly. Thank you for your supervision of the program, and thanks for sharing tonight. Next, Ms. Gates mentioned Michelle Briggs. Mrs. Briggs was Kelly's counterpart in grades 3-4 with Bridges to Success. So this was a continuous session as opposed to shorter mini 2-week sessions, but where the same model really applies. And with that, I'll invite Mrs. Briggs to give us a wave and share some of your takeaways from the program.
Hi, thank you for having us and letting us share about our experiences this summer. We had a great time working with our K-4 students together. I agree. Everything that Kelly said was great. I think that some of the best parts that we saw were kids getting to interact with each other. We had a lot of math games going on, kids doing things outside. There were lots of things written in chalk all over the sidewalk, games and obstacle courses, and just teachers and students having fun and enjoying learning together, focused in around our themes. And we saw a lot of smiles every day, which was great. Kids were enjoying their time at school. It was a little steamy, it was a little hot some days, but they were happy to be there, and they were having a good time. And that was good for, I think, for all of us to see. They showed up ready to learn and were ready to have a good day. So that was definitely an enjoyable part of our summer.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks again for supervising, and thanks for sharing. Next, we move into grades 5 through 8. And again, this is a grade band, a group of students whom we've been able to provide summer learning opportunities for some years now through our community school program. And I should reinforce here that this too is funded through a competitive grant. It's been with us for such a long time now, and it's part of what we do, the community school outlook and the programming associated. But that too, it should be noted, is made possible through grant funding that Mrs. Geithner and Mrs. Tiffany now do such a great job of securing each year for us. So in those grades, we were fortunate to have supervised Ms. Caitlin Tolino, and Caitlin is here to join us as well and share regarding the 5-8 program.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So our 5 through 8 program was based on the Summer Olympics, and we were very fortunate to have our community schools partners set up different guest speakers that our students engaged with, and that was really a highlight for this summer. We had Jean Mills come in for both sessions. We had Cornell 4-H talk about UV rays and nutrition with our students, and our students really got to engage in some fun Fridays. Another highlight of our program was our project-based interdisciplinary learning that our team of teachers did a really great job setting up for our students. An example of that was our students got to go down to the track, again, going off of that theme of the Summer Olympics. So in math, they measured the track out, and then in science, they determined why runners started at different places on the track. And then they went back to their humanities class and really were able to research some great track and field athletes that the Olympics have gotten to see across the years. And then one other highlight that I was super proud of was we provided a student survey at the end of both programs. And as a result, 98% of our students indicated that they felt safe and welcomed during our program. So that was something that I was very proud of as well. Thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Ms. Tolino. And finally, a very unique approach to summer learning at the high school level. Although we did also offer kind of a more traditional concept of credit recovery for students who needed some more specific work towards learning outcomes in their coursework. The Summer Institute was really blowing the doors off of that traditional kind of a concept of high school, summer school, or credit recovery, and was much more tailored to students' interest, with the goal of engaging students, welcoming them back into our buildings in advance of September. Ms. Amy Stevenson is here with us, I believe.
Yep.
There she is. She took a great leadership role with the summer offerings. And Ms. Stevenson.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. GRB offered something different this summer with a wide variety of classes. We offered from drones to cooking to athletic or sports, not so much structured athletics, but gaming and that type of athletics to esports. So a wide variety of classes to encourage students to come into the building after being virtual. Registration was open to students in grades 9 through 12, incoming ninth graders. We had 79 students register for classes and participate. Many students who enrolled took more than one session and many taking all 6 sessions. We saw students having fun while also learning new skills. So it was great to see. It was great to see all those students back in our building.
Thanks, Ms. Stevenson. With that, I invite any questions from the board.
Mr. Carroll, I wondered if, not tonight, but at some future date, you could give me a breakdown of the student grade, how many per grade level at that 5 through 8 community schools program.
Sure.
Yep. And then the only other question I had is I wondered, was there any effort made for particular students or particular target audience to try to encourage them? There were some students that I asked over the summer if they were participating, and none of them did. And they thought that I was putting them on about the whole camp style notion, that it wasn't more normal school like school.
So that's a great question. And the answer is yes and no. One of the challenges this year was the rapid turnaround with learning that the funds were available to be able to provide, to be able to offer these kinds of programs. Getting our plans, as you recall, there's a process for having the plans approved and recruiting on the heels of, all of that. So the window was very short in terms of recruitment. With that, we did tap into our principals who in turn tapped into their teachers to try, to make efforts at that personal recruiting. We kept them informed of who was enrolling in signing up for the program in their buildings so that they could make an extra effort to try to reach students who really needed to be there and hadn't signed up yet. A big challenge of the short turnaround was that in many cases, families already had plans in the summer. So we were competing against pre-existing plans in many cases. And the great news in relation to K-8 anyway is that now that we know that the K-4 funding is going to be there through the extended school day grant, we can get a much, much earlier start in terms of that recruitment. So we can be ahead of any of those other great but competing programs that are out there for families' attention in the summer.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Are there any other questions for the team? It was a great summer. I just want to extend my appreciation to Ms. Gates, Ms. Briggs, Ms. Toleno, and Ms. Stevenson, and all of the teams that you worked with, and all of the students that participated, and the families who allowed us to serve their children this summer and their students this summer. So thank you. You did a great job, and there was a lot of positivity, and it was a great step as we looked to fully transition back this fall. So thank you for all of your efforts on the behalf of our kids. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You as well, Mr. Carroll. Thank you. As far as the quarantine instruction, obviously that's an ongoing process. We're working to make it stronger, each week as we try to figure this out. Mr. Carroll, I know we added a support position to that. Would you like to speak to what we've done with respect to quarantine instruction?
Sure. And actually, before she X's out, maybe she could give another wave. It's Julie Cook Lynch is she's the star of the night in terms of a lot of what we have to share here. So Mr. Palvino is absolutely right. You've heard us use the phrase plan, reflect, evolve, repeat throughout this more than a year and a half now of dealing with the pandemic. And the quarantine instructional response is one of the best examples of this. This is very unpredictable in nature. You know, we never know how many quarantines will turn up in a given day, in a given grade, in a given building. So it's a very dynamic situation. It's also very different from what we experienced last year in how precise the quarantine designations have become. The DOH, the Department of Health, is really trying to be much more targeted in terms of whom they quarantine based on their guidelines. Our own mitigation strategies are really helping to keep those numbers of quarantined students very limited. With that presents some challenges on the other side of sometimes having a very broad cross-section of only a couple students in many, many grades who are in that situation of being quarantined in that school. So what we've learned is that you know, I'd say that we're moving into a new phase in terms of what we're able to provide for instruction for students quarantined. What we've learned is that in the same way that Mr. Els and his staff coordinate the health side of the quarantine, we need that same type of attention each day on the quarantine instruction side of things. And that's where I pointed to Ms. Cook-Lynch, who is stepping up to serve in the role of quarantine instruction coordination after school. Unfortunately, what we've realized is we don't have a great handle on which students will be quarantined the next day until after school. So we really need someone who is willing, able, and capable. Here's an example of be careful at how well you do your ESY job, as Ms. Cook-Lynch. So each day, Julie, at the end of her day, is working from a shared document with Mr. Els and the health office, in which she'll be able to see who are the students who are now on quarantine, who won't be in school tomorrow because of quarantine. We've learned that that's the moment when parents need to be informed of how to proceed instructionally. Okay, so Julie is actually making direct contact with parents on the heels of contact from Chris Els' office to follow up with exactly where they can find the instructional resources for their child in their teachers' Google Classrooms. Also providing any kind of help they need with accessing the Google Classroom or the meeting link, really providing any of that information that families may have received earlier but might not have given their full attention because it didn't apply at the time. Additionally, Julie is doing all the scheduling and connecting of quarantined students with the tutors, the quarantine tutors who we've been able to line up. Okay, so this week we've done some piloting of this in the last week. This week we're moving 100% into grades K-6 with offering an hour of virtual tutoring support from 3:45 to 4:45. Okay, so Julie is doing all the scheduling and aligning of students with teachers for that period of time, and also, like I say, making sure that families know how to access this, and kind of liaising as well with principals and the administrative team on things like attendance, numbers of students participating in this resource, because honestly, it's a big unknown. So she's going to help us to get a handle on that as it rolls out. K6 this week, with the plan to expand into 712 next week. Why not this week with 712? Frankly, we're still working on the staffing of the after-school instructional tutoring for those grades. We have a pretty large lineup of K6 teachers who are available at that time, covering the various subject areas and range of courses, particularly in GRB. Of course, is more of a challenge. But this week with K6 will also help Julie to work out any of the remaining kind of kinks in relation to how many Google links, how many Google meetings do we need for X number of quarantine students, for example. Also, we plan to distribute a family update this Friday, which would summarize all of this for families as well.
Right. And so we have all the things that we have in place already that are outlined on the website. This is building another layer, essentially, another layer of supports and connections, because that seemed to be one of those, we talk about coherent connections. This is trying to create coherence in the offerings and the opportunities. So we've got the base of the things that we've been offering. This is that next layer of coordination to create more coherence. And as Dan said, we're still recruiting staff to be able to support in the tutoring areas, because some of those areas are extremely specific. So obviously that's an area we'll continue to strive for. Are there any questions? We continue, as Dan said, monitor, adjust as we move along. And
Are we offering any incentives to any of these teachers to step up to the plate?
We chose the curriculum rate, which is a significant, or we didn't. Jerry, would you speak to that? Because you are the master recruiter and I should stay in my lane.
Sure. We are actually offering AIS rate, which is our highest rate outside of the school day for compensation within the teacher's contract. So because it is not direct instruction, it's supporting instruction, we felt the AIS rate was appropriate, and that rate we were hoping would allow us to recruit more extensively.
Thank you.
Are we able to use any of our subs or TAs to help fill in some of those gaps?
We are looking at people who have certification. So we did have some who expressed interest. As Dan mentioned, it gets more challenging to recruit in specific areas with people with content area expertise, like higher level mathematics, for example, or chemistry.
Our goal now, if we can't offer subject specific support in every subject every day, is to at least be able to offer, for example, math and science on Tuesday, social studies and English on Wednesday, and have a reliable schedule for families. But we're still not quite there in filling all of those holes, unfortunately.
Do we have to use teachers specifically, or can we use other people?
So again, at the high school level, we really do, high school, junior high, we really do get to where we need teachers who, even if they don't teach the specific course, are pretty familiar with that level of instruction. During the day, teacher assistants and aides are helping students navigating their assignments and things like that within Google Classroom. But we're really hoping that after school time can be the more substantive content support.
Yeah.
Do we have something consistent across the board for the middle school? If you're in quarantine, is it consistent 7 through 8 at the middle school to check in with all of your teachers, and are they all assigned work, and are they all to be made to do this work? And is the same true for the high school? Are we all being consistent in that? Or are we still working on that too?
So this layer that we're adding with the after school tutoring is, like Mr. Palvino said, that comes from an effort to be able to provide something consistently across the board. Junior high is actually, because of its team structure, we're actually very well positioned to be able to provide support during the day. Mr. Kopani and his team have set up a system in which there's a teaching assistant directly working within every team, and he has points in the day where he's able to make that teaching assistant available to directly support students who are home on quarantine. That works real. That is a great situation because that TA knows the kids, knows the students well, and is involved in planning and assisting with instruction every day. So quite possibly, you know, when a student meets with a teaching assistant, that teaching assistant has recently been involved in the daily instruction and the courses that the student might need help with. Again, high school with the huge variety of student schedules and offerings makes it much more complicated, which, you know, leads us to really pursuing what can we offer within each content area after school, because there's just not the schedule specific type of a response that we can provide.
Is that happening now at the junior high with the TA being the contact throughout the day?
Yes. So if,
okay.
And so if someone is having difficulty with that, you know, we'd encourage them to reach out to teacher or Mr. Kopani. But like I say, with Julie's help, when we bring Julie into that next level at junior high, that too will really help get the word out to people right when they need it, that's available.
Right. So yeah, because I think that's hard to get the word out. I don't think people are aware of. So if you're watching, that's happening, right? And at the high school, are teachers giving work at the high school, or I don't know. My kids haven't been on quarantine. Are they given work and then expected to try and just do it to the best of their ability? And then when they're off quarantine of like 8 days, which is like super long, what happened? I don't know. What do they do? I'm unsure.
Yes. So we emphasize with our teachers and other principals the need to make sure that our Google Classrooms are maintained, even though we hope not to have to make a full switch to remote. We know that possibility is always there, but more so on the day-to-day basis, the Google Classrooms really need to be current, because we know that on any given day we could have 1 or 5 or 7 students at home learning. So all of the instructional resources and assignments should be in that Google Classroom. Again, if a parent or a student doesn't find that, they should always reach out first to teacher. And of course, if they're having any difficulty there, reach out to principal. But we know that additional support is needed. So that's where that after school time.
So I think to answer Jen's,
I think her question.
Who's that? Dave? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Jennifer's question is really about the opportunity for synchronous instruction for the kids that are quarantined. Because if they are just in a Google Classroom, there's not an interaction with the teacher where they can have a dialogue, ask questions, get answers, and receive direct instruction. So I think she's perhaps trying to clarify that isn't possible right now. Is that correct? That's if for quarantine students?
That's
so
correct.
what we're doing in our model is we learned a lot last spring. What we learned was teachers trying to coordinate multiple, whether it was kids in front of them in classroom coupled with kids that were online at the same time. What was happening was when you talk to the kids, either set felt like they weren't making those connections. I know there are districts providing streaming into the classrooms. I also know that there's no interaction with some of those kids. They just sit and watch the class. So there's that piece. So we felt based on what we have, because ultimately there's actually not a requirement to provide during quarantine that we actually even provide any instruction. But we, however, here in Fulton, and I think absolutely the right thing to do in all districts, is to provide as much opportunity as possible. Ultimately is to figure out a way to keep kids in school and staff in school as much as possible through this time period. So one of the things that we've offered is making sure we learned a lot through the pivot. And let me use the term pivoting. Unfortunately, we've had to pivot twice. We had the sewer break here at the junior high, so we had to pivot to online remote learning. And we had to do the same thing last week at GRB. There's always a positive lining in everything that you have to do. What we learned was that there were some things that we were really able to pivot and move to remote learning very quickly. That kind of goes with quarantine as well, making sure that Google Classrooms are set up, materials, information is in there. We also learned what was working. And then we also learned, as I debriefed with both of the principals and teams from those schools, is that what are those things that like, here's what we need to really think about so that we're ready to be even more effective the next time. So I think that's what we're doing with this online piece. So 7th through 12 has access to a teaching assistant throughout the course of the entire day. From 7:30, I understand, almost till 2:30. That may be off by about 10 minutes, but my understanding is that there's pieces. I've actually seen the high school one, and I've talked to Mark as well. Go ahead, Dave. Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, but they're not certified. They're not certified to deliver instruction, though. And I know it's not going to be perfect, but I appreciate Jen's point that 8 days of quarantine is a long time. It's almost 2 weeks of school to mess up instruction. And yeah, I mean, I just wonder about, that's not a good situation for any kid to kind of be learning on their own, and even virtually in Google Classroom.
Well, but I also understand that having to do both isn't fair for the kids in school. And you want as many kids in school, and you want as many. I understand being a teacher that it's hard to do both. I honestly do. I guess I was just wondering, because I am truly unsure, like what we were doing that's consistent in Fulton. So just so that the kids know, and I get that it's hard. I think that a certified teacher should be instructing when we can, and I'm happy that we're moving forward. But I understand also that it is a huge obstacle, and I really truly feel horrible for these kids, especially at the secondary level, missing 8 days of school. So I appreciate that we're moving forward, but 8 days is way too many to try to catch up on, and it's just so much stress. Even my 8th grader was stressing out, and that's nothing compared to a chemistry lesson.
And you're also talking about kids that may be quarantined multiple times, back to back. So that's a concern as well. And I honestly, I'm not a teacher, so I don't, I give a lot of credit to the people who do that, but possibly even for me, even if the teacher is not engaging with the online students, just even having a lecture to listen to might be helpful if they can, if we could do something like that so that they're still getting the lecture or the notes or, not just the assignments that they're trying to process on their own.
I also wondered, Brian, in terms of students with IEPs, how are support services being provided for any of the quarantined students? Do we have a plan for that, or?
Yeah, I can speak to that. What I can do is I can provide a summary in our daily update. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to comment on that, but.
Well, we do have a system that we are putting in place with the teachers where we do document that they are connecting with the teachers on what they are implementing from the IEP services, so that they are receiving their services based on, the school recommendations for students that are in quarantine. Speech services are also going to be provided based on the speech therapist schedule, as well as either after school, or if they could somehow include it during their normal speech sessions based on the availability of working with the students. So we're trying to be flexible with that as well, as much as we can.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think the other challenge, I mean, in my dreams, if I could get the perfect thing would be, obviously, how can you stream kids into the classroom, have it interactive, and have 100% of the kids get the high quality experience that we all want them to have? The other piece we did explore was, do you hire certified teachers? The challenge right now is, and I've put it in some of the daily updates, but the challenge of even finding daily substitutes to cover classrooms is a real challenge right now. I mean, and so when we go and we have a pool, and Jerry could speak to it more, but we're not getting the number of qualified individuals that meet our expectations here, that we want in front of our kids and interacting with our kids. That pool is much lower, and which is, a challenge. So on top of that, there's a challenge around substitutes. There's also a challenge around if we were going to put a certified teaching team, we've looked to put full-time daily substitutes in each of the schools, but that's one for every school at this point. We're trying to get to allowing some flexibility. Prior to COVID, I don't want to make it sound like we didn't have some challenges. Prior to COVID, we often had somewhere around 6 unfilled substitute positions a day. And, the teams always be able to compensate. Now we're looking at around 12 to 18 on a daily basis. And on some days, we approach 20 out, and that borders on the difficulty of trying to do it. So they may be out because of personal reasons. They may be out because they're in quarantine, or in some cases, we have other districts quarantining staff's children. And so they're covering them. So there's a lot of dynamics to this. And so we're thinking about a lot of different ways to provide that support for kids. I mean, you're absolutely correct. Everyone who's asked a question this evening is, how do we provide the best quality experience for our kids? It's been interesting. I think that, one of the things I think we've done is, as kids come back, anytime I've had an opportunity to speak with a parent, if they've called here or I've ran into them, I've actually asked the question, gee, have your kids been quarantined at all? Of course, if they say yes, I really enjoy the conversation I have with them, because I want to know what was the experience that their kids had. And I think that that's important, because we're taking that feedback. And one of the pieces that Dan spoke to this evening was Ms. Cook Lynch's, role that she's taking on, which is parents are saying, we're not sure what's supposed to happen tomorrow. And so this is making that connection to all of those components we have in place. So that's where we're going for there and trying to do that. The other piece is that that we're finding, as I spoke about the substitutes, is that making sure, when we talked about how do we keep kids in school, it's following our mitigation factors. If there's anything we've learned, it's that, please don't come to school or work if you're sick or have those symptoms. That's a key here. And also making sure that we wear our mask properly, but also making sure that we're, taking care of ourselves as individuals and not coming in if we're off at all, because that's what we're finding. That was the same trend we saw last year. When we do our contract tracing, what we're finding is that, because all of us, I'm probably one of those worst offenders. I used to come to work when I just wasn't feeling quite right. I've always done that since I can remember. But now very much cognizant of that. And what we're finding is some of those positives actually say, well, gee, I really did have some of those symptomologies 2 and 3 days ago, which is then resulting in quarantines. So those are the kinds of things. So it's a combination of a lot of the things. But so what we're thinking about, we're thinking about how do we provide more access to staff. The tutoring is a great opportunity. I wish we had the opportunity for every content specialist to be able to be providing that support. We'll pay for it. But again, the pool, people have other obligations, and I respect that. We can only stretch so far. So we're doing a lot of different things, but the feedback from the families and the staff and the kids is essential. So as you hear things, we immediately take that information and say, how can we tweak that? How can we make this better? And that's been our mode since March of 20. How can we constantly make this better? We ended up coming out pretty strong the end of last year. and now we're trying to figure out the new curveballs that we're getting this year. So that's where we're at. So I really appreciate this conversation tonight, as we think about things, and we wanted to share what we're doing with Ms. Cook Lynch, and we'll add to that afterwards.
And Brian, if I may, I just want to say that anytime anyone has brought a concern to me, I have taken it immediately to Brian to pass on to the appropriate person. And I have to say that our staff has been very responsive when they know that there's an issue. Some of what I have found is frustration because families have tried to reach out and the connection didn't occur for whatever reason. And it's getting people to not give up and to try to connect again. And again, we just have to keep letting folks know what's the best way to connect with the teacher. That would be the best first point of contact. And again, our kids getting there, enlisting their parents' help. If they're frustrated, we have to make sure our students know, if you're frustrated, we don't want you to be frustrated. Go to mom and dad and or whatever a significant adult in your household and say, look, I need some help making contact and I need some help sorting this out. I've found everyone to be wanting to do a better job. Oftentimes they just didn't know that they needed to do a better job. So I can't say enough to anybody that's watching. Communicate. And I know that for some people, they think we over communicate at times. This is just a situation where we can't communicate enough to make sure that we're getting to our kids as quickly as possible.
Robin, I'd like to just add that it's really great. Until it happens to you, you don't know. I have 3 kids in school, and I had no idea until I read Mr. Doty's email and then him speaking. I had no idea that it was an issue because I didn't have a kid in quarantine. I had no idea. So I'm really appreciative of that. And I just have one more question. I know that we were at one point talking, at least in Phoenix, I can't remember if we were here in Fulton, about the students that we have that are on a medical note not to come to school at all this year. We were going to provide instruction through city BOCES virtually. Is that something that we're doing? Was that a conversation? Did I dream it? But I feel like we at one point were talking about going through city BOCES for students who were not able to attend class in person, only through a medical note though, because we want all the kids back in school. Is that an option, or are we doing that?
Jerry, do you want to speak to that? Because you work with Liz a lot. I mean, I could. We had a number of families this summer. We did have families reach out to us if they had those medical types of exclusions. Yeah. And we had the opportunity to work, and we have the opportunity to work with BOCES to be able to provide some of that full time. We had very limited number that contacted those though. Jerry, do you want? I want to say that number broached right around between 14 and 20 the last time I knew. But Jerry, you want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, actually, the numbers are lower, and I will defer to Dan on who was actually enrolled. But we do have students in the secondary level who are enrolled in city BOCES programs. We're providing medical tutoring for our elementary age students who are in that situation. And again, that number at the elementary level, I believe, is very low. I think we're at 5 right now.
Can we use BOCES for quarantine students, or is that a big no?
The programs at BOCES are more commitment to be participants like through a semester.
Right.
It's not a daily type of program. I actually thought of even iTutor and some of these other kinds of things. Dom probably thinks, I think Miss Dr. Lisi knows I come to him all the time. What about this? Because I was exploring, like, thinking about how we could utilize our funds differently. So looking at those things, but again, with the inconsistencies and the needs of kids, I think that creates some of those issues. That's why we thought about creating our own team here. But again, it's been about the ability to provide teachers to be able to do that, certified teachers in those areas specifically as well. Any other question? We wanted to just provide an update. Obviously, we'll continue to, we did a lot of clarification in the last family communication. We'll continue to do that. I'm hoping that the new position that we've created after school allows us to create more connections. But again, if you're talking to parents, the best way we can gauge and adjust is to get feedback about what's working and what's not.
So I'd actually like to ask something. So what Miss Peppolaro asked or talked about earlier was those lectures and everything. And I know that last year for me personally, when we had those days without the meets, it was much easier when we did have those lectures that we could like go through and like do our classwork with those. And I know that you were talking about how you wanted to incorporate like tutors and everything, but in the meantime, could we maybe suggest that teachers do go back to making those videos? Because I found those very helpful.
Yeah, we take all suggestions, Miss Lamanna, for sure. So I appreciate it. And that's why you're sitting here as the junior rep. So you and Reagan are so important. This is one of the pieces that we were missing for the first year. So once again, thank you, Miss Abelgore, for making sure we have students. That started with you. So thank you. But that's what you're supposed to do, Miss Lamanna. Thank you for speaking up and sharing. We'll take a good look at that and see what we can do, okay? All
Thank
right.
you.
You're very welcome. All right. Any other questions? Maybe the next thing that I share will help. You know, it's exciting at the same time frustrating. The COVID testing, I want to provide a COVID testing update. We found out early last week that the Department of Health would not be the lead, that each school district would now be the lead here in Oswego County. Different from some of you that work in other districts where the county is more of the lead. We have great partners in the county. I'm not going to be critical at all. They've been fabulous with us. But one of the things that I thought about this summer, and we're going to approach that this way, about a month ago, we actually ordered from New York State the Binax Now, which are the rapid antigen tests. A few thousands of those. We have not heard any feedback. We have our limited licensure. We did use that test for prom and some other events in the spring. It's good for pool testing. However, it does have a high rate of false negatives. But it is good for pool testing. The other thing that we found out about last week, and I want to thank my friends to the north in Oswego, they shared with us that they had reached out and had a contact who actually number of school districts are using a test called the Affinity Assure Empowering. It's a pool test. It's a nasal swab. It is a free test supported by the federal. It is a PCR test. I have been in contact with them. I've had 2 meetings so far. Hopefully the logistics team for New York State will be reaching out to us. And that is a pool test where you'll have between 5 and 12 vials in a jar, if you will, and that gets sent to a lab somewhere. Again, I don't know the logistics. 24 to 36 hours they maintain. Upon receipt at that lab, we would have results. If there were any positives in that sampling, they actually have a second sample in there, and they could actually identify the positive. So that's the second thing. So that's looking at that. That is a free test, as well as the Binax was a free. The key is getting our hands on it, access and capacity. So we're waiting on that. And that's a training we're in, and Ms. Geithner is in the process of recruiting. I am a person who believes that if I can get medical professionals to do those tests, that's what I'd like to see. So that's what we are pursuing using our ARP. So Ms. Geithner has been recruiting. I believe we possibly may be doing a couple of interviews, I believe we said earlier in a couple of days. The other piece, and this is the part where, you know, I'm a little bit more excited about this as well, is I have had a long conversation with Abbott. Abbott is the company that does the Binax Now. They're also the company that does the ID Now. So if you went to, let's say, Walgreens or some of these other places, that is a PCR test. And in my discussion with them, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through that conversation with them, and I went through the weekend and into yesterday. The ID Now is actually a test where if I were, let's say, Jen, one of your children came down to the office and had a symptomology, we could actually create a regional testing center right here in the district. I'm trying to get my hands on 2 of the machines. You get the results in 13 minutes in symptomatic. That would change the game when I'm hearing from families that it's taking hours, days to get those results. So I don't want to go out there and put myself 100% out there, but I am really working to get my hands on that test in that machine. And what that is it's allowing us, it would allow us to do a more invasive test, a more accurate test. It's 94% accurate. It's a molecular test. So I've been working with Dr. Morgan, our medical director for the district. He likes the idea of having multiple approaches to testing. And the reason why is that there is concern about capacity and availability. So for us to have a multi-pronged approach, I think is the most aggressive way. So by having the Binax antigen test, that one available, coupled with the test out of Virginia, which is the Affinity Assure, which we're working on trying to get that here. And a number of our districts in the county are also exploring the use of that tests. And then the Abbott ID Now, which is more of that, hopefully if we just had those for us, we could provide that service to families, which gets back to some of the questions and discussions earlier. Again, sounds like I'm offering a lot. It depends if I can get my hands on them. The conversations I've had with respect to the first two has been very good. The Virginia test, the Assure Affinity, and the Binax Now has been ordered, but it's been out there a month. The ID Now also was a very positive conversation. We just have to work through some of the logistics. And I asked how long does it take to get the machine? Could be 2 to 4 weeks. We'll see. Again, the problem is everybody in the country is trying to access those at the same time. So we've got a kind of a triple pronged approach. Part of it is to do pool testing. Other is how can I get kids and staff back as quickly as possible so they're not waiting for 4 and 5 days for a negative test to return. We'd be able to do some of those things. So that's some of those. Those are a couple of things we're really hearing from families. So I hope it's exciting. It's also frustrating because I can't reach right out and get it right now. At the second, I want it right now. But I know this is the right thing. I wish we had been loosened up the reins on us, earlier to kind of give us that. And then obviously we would turn those plans into the county. The county has to approve, which I don't think is the issue. And then, and I should let you know that the county got just about $4 million out of that. We would receive a little over $500,000 allocated for expenses associated with testing. The key is just all the coordination on top of that. So really would start with staff testing, and then which is required by the governor, and then coupled with the pool testing, coupled with the access point, which to me is the exciting part around the ID Now. I would really like to be able to provide that to our families and to our staff. I think that's a game changer. But again, I hope I can change the game in the coming weeks. So are there questions about testing? I know way too much about testing. I never thought I would. So unfortunately, a knowledge I have that I don't want to have, but it's okay. All righty. Thank you. And then the waiving of purchasing requirements, Dr. Lisi, you do have your doctorate now. Dr. Lisi and Ms. Nichols, if you could speak to our purchasing request.
Sure, I'd be happy to. You may have noticed tonight we started out with some wonderful news about all the great things that are happening in the district, and then we transitioned to COVID testing, and then me. So you might notice a trend. So I have a bit of a challenge to share with you, and would certainly welcome your input. It's no surprise to anyone here that the supply chain issues, the national ones that we're all experiencing, have reached our district, and so we have a bit of a challenge getting some of the supplies and materials we need. So I'd like to propose a recommendation this evening to hopefully suspend, at least temporarily, and remove policy 6700. And I just want to share with you what our current policy and practice is, so you can have an understanding of why this is important at this point. And Mrs. Nichols, feel free to add your comments. At this point, the way that we're purchasing, anything over $500 will require multiple quotes. And what we're seeing and what we're experiencing is by the time we go through that process, we're either losing out on what we need, or the price has changed, and it's taking a considerable amount of time. And for a lot of things, just the time element alone of getting what we need is becoming an issue. The mitigating factor here would be to suspend that and hopefully consider a revision to it. And the revision that we're proposing is minimal. And I think you may have a copy of that, and I can just share with you that 6700.0, paragraph 5, it currently reads that the purchasing agent shall not be required to secure alternative proposals or quotations for, and number 1 currently reads emergencies where time is a crucial factor. And I guess what I would recommend to help in our current situation is a slight change to number 1, where it would read emergencies where time is a crucial factor and/or supplies are limited or in high demand. We're still, and I want to share this with you, under normal circumstances, I think that serves us well for accountability and oversight. We're obviously not in normal times right now, so we could use the mitigating factor and some help with this particular policy. We're also currently governed by municipal law, so purchases over $20,000 are still governed by the same practices, and that hasn't changed, at least not that I'm aware of at this point. I did reach out to the comptroller's office to see if there was some easing of those rules considering the situation, and I'm not aware of any yet. I'm waiting for a response from them. So at this time, that would be my recommendation. And of course, I welcome your feedback.
Kathy, would you add anything to that? Because you're working in partnership down there, trying to.
Just, I know that Secretary has been working very hard trying to obtain quotes. She's done a fabulous job, and then has shared them with me. It's taking up a lot of her time. You know, we're finding that as we're trying to do things using the federal dollars, and you know, we're competing with a lot of other school districts right now too, and supply constraints. So overall it's difficult. I mean, I think we're trying the best we can, and we've been somewhat successful.
And what we're hearing down the road, and you may have been seeing it in the news, apparently there's an increasing lack of a lot of goods and supplies available to do things across the country. And you read about ships that are just sitting out in ports waiting to be unloaded for days upon days. And so the problem is going to be access. And for example, you heard me just speak about the testing. I mean, we ordered the Binax test on September 20th. It is now October the 12th, and we have not given any response whatsoever from that. And that was from the New York State Education Department and New York State Department of Health, who was coordinating that effort. So, and when I spoke to the Abbott person, it's that they're literally making those tests as quickly as they can. It's just, there's such a high need. So that's an example, but there are other examples as simple as availability of materials or goods that we need to have just to do the cost of doing daily business around here. So I think those are the kinds of things. Chairs. Dr. Lisi and I talked about the access as simple as chair. We've never had access or trouble getting access to chairs. But right now we have those wonderful desks that go up and down and are adjustable. We want to have chairs that go along with them. That's an area where we're still struggling to get access. There's just not availability. So that's an example.
So I had asked Dr. Lisi earlier today if we do this, would it be possible to provide the audit committee or the board with a list anytime that we deviate from our policy so that we have accountability and an explanation if we're asked by the comptroller's office to demonstrate that it was in fact a difficult situation and we needed the materials and time was of the essence because it was something limited.
My apologies, Mrs. Griffin. I did forget that. It was on my list. Yeah, we would. That's something that we could provide as part of the oversight, is a report to the board with items that we purchased that normally fit in that range.
So with that, I feel relatively comfortable under the circumstances. These are unique times. But again, this is open for the board, how the rest of my colleagues are feeling. And so we have this proposal on the table to suspend this current policy and temporarily until we see some kind of easing up in the ability to get materials. Is that correct, Dr. Lisi?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm asking my colleagues for your thoughts.
Could we put a timeline for future review so we remember to come back to it? I mean, I don't know what the recommendation for that would be. Would it be for the duration of the current school year?
I'm wondering, that's a great suggestion. I'm wondering if we can perhaps do a brief report at the second meetings of the month and just provide that in the board backup. That would align when we're doing our updates to the funding, Mr. Cordone, you know how we're doing the monthly reports. That's the second month. That's what we could do with a listing of those items, Ms. Nichols and Dr. Lacey. Does that work?
Sure.
It would align with our fiscal report. So that might be a good time to just match them up.
Sure.
As a suggestion.
Any other thoughts? Everyone's very quiet. Any questions? And Brian, your recommendation? I've been around long enough, but I don't know that everyone knows that because it's on the agenda. It's really goes unsaid that you are supporting this, but you might want to speak to that.
Yeah, no, this is definitely, and after being just dealing extensively with all this testing world that we're in right now and accessibility and really understanding in that domain, we're having that same issue in many other domains, whether it's access to, school supplies right on through desk chairs, all those kinds of things. And the other piece is the costs seem to be going up each week. You're seeing different costs. It's a supply and demand thing. So I think we have to be aggressive. We need to be efficient, and we need to be able to access the supplies, materials, and resources necessary for our staff and our students to do their job. So I believe this is the right thing. I like the idea of having a listing of where we've deviated, so the board is very aware and that we have that documentation, hence if we ever have an audit as well. But it's fiscally responsible to do that. So I would recommend, yes, we should approve. Any other questions? That is the conclusion of the superintendent's report, Ms. Griffin. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone move item 4.01, please?
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagor.
Yes.
4.02, please.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagor.
Yes.
Item 4.03.
Move it. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
and Mrs. Albagor.
Yes.
Item 4.04, please.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
and Mrs. Albagor.
Yes.
Item 5.01, please.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
and Mrs. Albagor.
Yes.
Item 6.01, please.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion on these policies? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagor.
Yes.
And before I go any further, Mrs. Perry, I was wondering, did we have a resolution for suspending policy 6700.0?
No.
Was that the intent tonight?
Dr. Lisi?
Dr. Lisi?
I'm sorry, I believe it was.
Before I move out of the policy realm, I wondered if one of my colleagues would like to offer a resolution in the affirmative to suspend policy 6700.0.
I'll move.
And we will, David, you wanted a timeline in there, so you want to revisit it, let's say at the end of the school year, no later than the end?
That would be great.
Okay. So this resolution, it's not in front of you, but David is putting forward a resolution to suspend policy 6700.0, which is our purchasing policy. And we will revisit looking at this policy by the end of the school year. Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mrs. Pipilardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
And Mrs. Albagor?
Yes. Items 7.01 through 7.11, I'd like to batch if you are so willing.
Yes. Move it.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion on 701 through 7.11? No. Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall?
I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mrs. Pipilardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
And Mrs. Albagor?
Yes. Would someone move item 7.12?
Move it. Second.
Any discussion?
Robin,
Yes.
I can't see anything because I'm a mess here with internet. So when it gets to the one for the coaches, could you let me know
This
which
is it.
one?
This is it, Mrs.
Okay,
Lyons.
that's what I thought it was. Thank
Yes.
you.
All right. So it was moved and seconded, and we'll discuss any other discussion. Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall?
I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Abstain.
Mrs. Pipilardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
And Mrs. Albagor?
Yes. 7.13, please.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mrs. Pipilardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
And Mrs. Albagor?
Yes. Okay. Board forum. Mrs. Papalardo, would you like to start tonight?
Sure. I missed the first board meeting after we came back to school. So I just want to, again, thank our teachers, faculty, staff, bus drivers for, getting us going. Special thank you to all those that have stepped up to help tutor and help get our kids that are in quarantine, on the right track and stay moving forward. Homecoming was amazing. I was super excited to hear from the kids that they had an awesome time, football game, dance, and I know that a lot of other schools didn't provide a homecoming dance, and I thought it was really good that we still moved forward with ours. And the feedback I got was really, really positive, and they loved it. And that could be because they haven't done anything in a couple years, or that could be because it was different. Either way, really good to hear that feedback. Also, loved seeing the Pop Warner kids out there for halftime. I think it's really important that we get our community involved. with things that the district is doing in our school and games, homecoming games, football games, any kind of thing where we can invite our younger, kids to come out and participate and do something is just really good. And so that was a great idea. Whoever did that, thank you. That was awesome. I did want to make sure we had kind of talked about in the audit, like it was briefly touched on, pool maintenance. And we did have an email that I just want to make sure that we're making sure that that doesn't get lost and that we're following up with Dr. Talents on where we stand with that and see where our plans are headed for some of the upgrades to the pool. And that's it.
Mr. Cordone, would you like to go next? David, I can't hear you. I think you're not on.
I wanted to again thank our principals and express gratitude for everything that they do, especially under the current environment, with COVID and the pandemic. It's an extra layer of a lot of work, and it's greatly appreciated. I know firsthand what we're all working through. And I want to thank the superintendent for the updates from the summer programs. Glad that they were a success. Looking forward to see how they evolve and become even more effective as the future years, are upon us, and we're able to kind of learn from this first time and make improvements. And I want to also thank Brian and his team for the update regarding our support for students quarantine. I know that we have a lot of concerns and there aren't easy solutions there. I'm sure that everybody's doing the best they can. That's it.
Mrs. Abelgore.
I too want to thank all of our principals for all that they do. It's a great month to go ahead and acknowledge everything that they go through for all of our students. I want to officially welcome Molly for being on our student voice. Thank you for chiming in tonight too. And Mr. Palvino, I think it was great that you had Reagan read that statement for our principals. I think maybe in the future we could utilize them to do more things like that. It's really good to hear their voices. And it's also great to see that you guys are coming into some kind of I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Good to see with the quarantine and the tutoring and that things are starting to roll and that we're starting to get in there, because I too have heard a lot of parents concerned about that. So thank you very much for that update. And that's what I have for this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Crandall. Tim, your mic's off.
Well, I want to thank all our principals for doing such a great job. And I want to thank our presenters tonight for doing a great job. And that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Mainville.
I just had to hit my unmute with my left hand. I'm not very good with my left hand, apparently. I really liked brainstorming together tonight and listening to each other and learning from each other. And like Miss Albagore said, Miss Lamanna, Molly, it was really great that you spoke up during the meeting, because it brought up a really good point. Why can't we maybe offer a stipend or some sort of money for teachers instead of maybe tutoring, but maybe they want to record a lesson. It comes from you guys. You guys are the ones who are affected the most. So I'm really glad that you spoke up and you were here tonight. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Parkhurst. I wanted to thank her last meeting, but things got a little crazy. She's always at every meeting, and I know that life gets in the way, but for somebody who's about to retire and listening to her with her celebrations with the graduation rates and everything she was speaking about with the high school and just seeing the sparkle in her eye and just how excited she gets we're very lucky to have her in Fulton and everybody else. But I'd just like to give a shout out to Mrs. Parkhurst. So thank you for that. And that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Lyons.
Well, everybody has just about said everything that I've been thinking. I appreciate the principals for everything they do. We do have a staff of individuals that go above and beyond to make sure our kids are being educated in every way. Jess, I'm glad you brought up the fact about the youth participation. We've been doing that for years and years. My kids were involved in high school sports, but I don't think we ever recognized that. So you brought it to the forefront, and I appreciate that. I guess I don't know what else to say. Mr. Lisi, just to let you know, I'll be contacting you. I had a lot of difficulties tonight, so thanks, everyone.
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to Dr. Lisi on receiving the doctor. I know it's a lot of work to do that. And I feel very fortunate to have yet another employee. We have so many employees so dedicated to this district, but also dedicated to your passion, which is education. So thank you very much and congratulations. I want to take a moment and thank all of our principals. It has been a difficult more than a year. It's a difficult job, a challenging job to begin with, but made really difficult with the pandemic. And to Jen's observation that they maintain a sparkle in their eye and they still keep going when some days I know that they feel just piled on with challenges. And they continue to look out for our students. And I can't stress enough to those of you that are watching, you can always reach out to your building principals to ask questions concerning your children and their education. And if you can't get to their teachers, then by all means, reach out to your principals. Try the teachers first. We've got a lot of great folks out there that just want to do a good job, a great job. They don't always know what it is you're thinking or what's been missed. They try real hard. Reagan, thank you so much tonight for reading the proclamation from the superintendent. It was wonderful. And I do hope that there's more opportunities going forward for our students. And I want to thank whoever thought of asking Reagan. Good job. Good thinking. With that said, I'm going to move the board now to item 8. Jean, do you want to make that 8.03? We don't have an 8.02. Do you want to renumber that, Mrs. Perry?
Yes.
Okay, so 8.03 is now going to become 8.02. And someone move to go to executive session.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall. Mr. Cordone.
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo.
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
And Mrs. Almagore.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, folks, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. And we're going to convene to executive session. When we complete our executive session work, we will come back out into public session and finish the meeting. I thank those of you that are watching, and perhaps you'll come back and join us or stick around. 5 minutes, folks, and we'll go to executive session. Thank you. We've now returned back to public session. And at this point in time, I'm going to ask for someone to move item 8.03, which was renumbered. Originally, it was 8.04, and we needed to make a correction in the numbering of our resolutions. So on item 8.03, would someone move it?
Move it.
Is there
Second.
any discussion? Okay, I am going to go through the list. Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Abelgore,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
and I am a yes. All right. Thank you. And item 8.04, which was formerly 8.05, to adjourn